Ready?
Hi everyone, welcome to today's BSIA broadcast, the Digis switch off becoming a reality. I'm your host, Katherine Ingram, PR and Comms Officer at the BSIA, and I'm delighted to welcome our panel of experts today, including John Coleman from CSL Group, Terry Roffey from Brook Security, James Gribben from S&C, Dave Wilkinson from BSIA, Cain from TalkTalk, and John Livermore from Openreach. It's with no doubt that this topic today is extremely important and time sensitive to discuss in the professional security industry, and many of you have submitted your questions today for our panel to answer. So before we begin, if you're unfamiliar with IP voice, there is a separate broadcast which we did last year, and it's available on demand from our YouTube channel at any time. Any questions you have during the broadcast, please submit them in the Q&A below. And here to tell us a little bit about the BSIA's involvement is Director of our Technical Services, Dave Wilkinson. Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Katherine, and thank you for all that have joined this call. I think a bit from BSIA's point of view, as a trade association, we're quite unique in respect that our members produce, supply, install, maintain and monitor signalling equipment and services. So this puts us in a very strong position to talk with authority on how the transformation of the telecoms network will impact our sector and its customers. So just a pretty quick history lesson on this to sort of set the scene is that back in 2007 and 8, we actually started our engagement in something known then as the 21CN network change, which was a change from the old System X to an IP protocol, although that didn't go through to the fruition that I think BT maybe expected at the time. It was a great opportunity for us to learn how actually our legacy systems were going to work or not, as the case may be, on the new networks. So back, I think then after that, around about July 2016, we actually had more of an engagement then where our then chair, I believe, of our manufacturers section, Tony Allen, God bless him, actually wrote a letter with ourselves, which we then sent to Ofcom. That started the ball rolling for us, to be fair. In terms of actually opening up the door to start engagement with Openreach, BT Consumer, and some of the other communications providers at that particular time. So there sort of started the whole process of actually what all IP was going to look like for us and how we would engage with the wider communications industry and the regulator Ofcom, which was the key for that for us. So we started to learn about this. We started to have a look at how this would work for our communication equipment. And gave our manufacturers a good opportunity to start looking at this in terms of how it would impact their products going forward. I think very much from May 2018, that's when our heightened engagement really started. That was when I'm sure John on the call will talk more about that when he in his bit about Openreach in terms of actually announcing the withdrawal of their wholesale line rental services, and that's when we really started to look at how the PSTN switch off was going to happen. So obviously around then is when everything did start. I mean, for us, again, it was a push for testing of products. Again, we were trying to learn how equipment would work on these new networks. And this would be our first real opportunity to actually see how voice over internet protocol really would work, given the fact that a lot of our legacy communications devices work across the voice part of the network, not the broadband, and clearly this is the whole key change really, that the voice side is only for voice, and therefore we were about to learn just how that's going to impact on us from older legacy equipment. So we started to talk to a lot of the communications providers. We've done testing at multiple test facilities from some of the key providers, from Openreach, from BT Consumer. We've had some testing with Virgin Media, and more latterly we've had more discussions with TalkTalk, Open Air in Ireland, since they also are going through a transition process, and Kingston Communications. So the door is still open there. There's still a lot going on and still a lot to understand in terms of how the communication providers actually will talk with their end users and how that will impact on our systems. So again, we will continue to inform industry of the changes as they happen as we find out more about them. One thing to probably leave you on is just a couple of facts which might be of interest and actually set the scene for the rest of this particular call, is that we estimate, and I do say it's an estimate, there's probably around about 4 million remote signalling systems out there connected in some shape or form. There are around about 1.7 million connected to blue light services. Whether it's police, fire, or even possibly ambulance services. Around about 1.4 million of those actually have URNs for the police side, and that's from stats back to 2018. So again, it sort of sets the scene. There is quite a significant amount of systems out there that do signal, whether they're police or just key holder. But I guess the big question is how many of those are connected to the PSTN network? Again, we can only estimate this because we can only reach so far, and obviously the information we've got, and that is anywhere between 1 to 2 million connections that possibly touch the PSTN network. So this is a big issue in terms of moving off the PSTN onto more IP systems. So from our point of view, transition is well underway. Stakeholders really need to act now. Katherine, that's probably as much as I would probably go at this particular point. I think the questioning might actually help answer some of these questions. So hopefully that was useful to everybody to understand where we are from a trade association point of view.
Great, thank you, Dave. So on to our first question, which is directed at John Livermore from Openreach. John, you approached us and various industry bodies about the Digis switch off, but actually what problems does this cause?
Oh, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Katherine, for the question. I guess having spent 10 years in the alarm industry myself, I was very kind of aware of the challenges. And I guess most of you have probably heard some of the things I've said in the past or heard it's all IP, so I'm not going to go through it all again. I think just in essence, remembering the fact that we're now 4.5 years away from the end of the PSTN network as we know it. And in the sense of the alarm industry, we've been plugging in different devices into the master socket, or maybe in some cases an extension socket, or we've been wiring into a block or whatever it might be. But it's remembering that over the next 4.5 years, the end customers will have over 600 different communications providers, so Sky and TalkTalk and BT, and 600 others that they've had over the years. All of those different companies will be contacting your end customers and telling them that they are going to move over to all IP, VoIP, digital, call it what you will. And on the day that happens, it means that the only thing that comes out of that socket is going to be broadband. So anything plugged into an extension, anything plugged into a master socket will not work on the day that your customer moves over to digital, all IP, unless it goes through a router. So if you've got a router, that sounds great, but remember that it's also got to be a VDSL router, because effectively the change in the network means that we are moving away from an all copper line to a line that is at least part fiber. And because it's part fiber, that means that you are going to need to have a VDSL router, not an ADSL router. So even if your end customer is on some kind of slow broadband, they are going to need to have their CP send them through the service provider a new router, and that's going to have to be plugged in, plugged out, all that kind of stuff, and potentially recommissioned. So the thing that worried me most, I guess, we've been talking about this for some years now, as Dave said, is no one seems to have a handle on just how many Digis are out there. Maybe Digis without signaling providers, so without CSL or Red Care involved, and they may have been sitting there quite happily twinkling away for years, but they will piecemeal at different times, different places, different locations, depending on the communications provider, start to see those things suddenly stop working. And the communications providers, and I know Phil's here, he's got a background like myself, both in alarms and also in terms of CP, and he'll come on to it, I'm sure, later, is that CP will contact you, no doubt, and they will tell you to contact your alarm company and all that kind of stuff to make sure things are going to work. And that's all the responsible things they should do and will do. But it's how the end customer reacts to that, reads it, sees it, tells you about it, makes you aware that you've got to do something or that you want them to do something. And there is potential here, if we don't grab hold of these things and think about doing some kind of future proofing, maybe changing them out long before we get to that stage, that those alarms are suddenly going to stop working, and you're going to have unhappy customers. Potentially, the first they know something's gone wrong is when their alarm signaling fails and they actually get an alarm on their panel. So that's really why I'm reaching out, and thanks to yourself, Katherine, and Dave, and all the folks at BSIA for taking this so seriously and getting this event today.
No, thank you, John. Well, you were mentioning comms providers there. That gives a great transition over to Phil. Phil, what problems does this cause you or your customer base as a comms provider?
Well, I think it's very similar to what John said. First of all, thanks for inviting us on, and good morning, everybody. The main issue, I'm not a technical person, by the way, so I'll say this in very simple terms. The main issue is analog equipment won't work on digital networks, which is an obvious statement. But the other problem is, as John has alluded to, that as a communications provider, we don't know who has specialized equipment on their telephone line, be that alarm signaling, as far as ATMs, that kind of anything really, because nobody's kept a record of it. So that's a big issue for us. We as John said, would be wanting to contact our customers and say this is going to happen on such and such a date and that. So for us, we're still in the process of trying to trace users via the ARC number program, whereby ARCs, alarm receiving centers, send us their Connect 2 numbers, and we can trace who's called that number in the last 12 months and reasonably assume there's a piece of specialized equipment on it. So as in our case in TalkTalk, we're still doing that. We've got a little bit of a way to go with it. I don't get 100%, but the more that we can get, the better. But then the other thing I would just say to people on the call who are involved at the sharp end installing these alarms and monitor them is that you need to have a plan, really. You can't wait and wait and wait. The longer you wait, the more transitions you got to do in a week. And so that's the thing that I would say, is that we need to have a plan. We can't wait for somebody else to do something. Otherwise, we'll be waiting a very long time.
Great, thank you, Phil. You mentioned ARCs there, James. I mean, what problems does this cause SMC as an ARC, or ARCs in general? And do you know, like, any problems facing ARCs as this upgrade is happening, and what problems are going to happen after?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Katherine. Good morning, everybody. There's two main things that spring to mind. As an ARC, we're still monitoring vast amounts of digital communicators at the moment. The longer these swap outs are left, it's going to put an increased amount of pressure on our administration team. Our administration team, they've got their normal throughput of work, orders, cancellations, amendments, that kind of thing. And it's going to leave us with potentially an impossible task to achieve all these swap outs if they're left until the last moment, the last year, last 18 months. So there's that to consider. The other aspect as well is customer attrition. So it's especially relevant to digital communicators that are residential sites on kill or only response. I think we've all got the threats of coming up from below of self-monitored app-based systems. None of us want to lose monitored systems. But I think the longer the swap outs left, potentially the less thought is going to go into them, the more pressurized end users are going to feel. So I think that attrition is definitely a real threat to SMC and to all of the ARCs as well.
Okay, wow. Yeah, no, it's a big problem going on. I mean, from an installer perspective, I mean, they must be your clients as well. Terry, anything from your perspective?
Yes, morning, Katherine, morning, everyone. I think it's sort of like the perfect storm, isn't it, for installers in our industry? These sort of changes are happening at a time which is sort of unprecedented, and I agree with James about customer preservation. So we've got to be looking at trying to keep our customers. I think knowing the size of the problem is a thing that we need to identify. What technology we're going to use. Are we going to charge for it, given again the pressure of self-monitored systems? And what are we going to tell our customers? And if, in terms of harmony, I think if the industry is doing it together, then the individual companies aren't exposing themselves to why you're doing it. And I haven't heard that any of my neighbours or any of my friends are doing it. So I think communication is good. And for installers, where do you start? You know, where do you start? When do you start it? So I think those are the issues for the installing companies. Thank you.
So, I mean, we've heard from all sides that, like, routers are going to be involved. People need to be informed. It's all about kind of keeping the customer base and the client base happy. Dave, from a BSIA perspective, I mean, how are we actually going to stop possible rogue traders taking advantage of this upgrade and trying to make a quick buck out of people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a few things here. I mean, firstly, as you say, is that we obviously have a dedicated web page for all this particular work, and that was quite deliberate. A lot of our members wanted to, as Terry's just said, really, is to sort of get a recognition that this is happening, and it's not because installers just want to make some money here. At the end of the day, they're obviously having to consider the risks of leaving equipment to take a chance. And clearly that's not something our industry can do. We obviously monitor intruder, hold up, fire, all these things. These are all key services that our providers either install, maintain, monitor, or provide services for. So it's really important that as a professional body that we can get a message out to make it very clear that this is not something that is just predicated by members wanting to just find themselves a revenue stream. This is because the whole of the comms industry is changing, and we have analog equipment there. So it's really important that we get the message out of what we are doing. And the key thing for me is that we've made it quite clear in various seminars and webinars and things that we have done, is that using companies that are members of trade bodies, again, that gives a sense of assurance. I hope as well that they can see that these are professional companies. And equally, because we work with partners in terms of obviously things like MPCC for the police, we obviously work closely with the certification bodies. So again, from that perspective, that's where our recommendations are, that companies are members of the trade association for the BSIA, and they're approved by certification bodies. That's giving an assurance to hopefully the clients and the customers of just how professional we are as an industry, and the fact that clearly we are there for their needs. One thing that I would point back to is back in 2019, we actually worked and we actually put forward a proposal to the MPCC in one of their meetings that we should issue a joint, I guess, a flyer, for a better word, to suggest that that could be used by the police when they are putting out their information to the end users who are applying for URNs. It could be used by installers, certification bodies, anybody. And it was a one-page flyer that is actually on our website. I'm sure Katherine or somebody might be able to put a link into the chat if that's helpful. And that was jointly signed by all the key industry bodies at that particular point in time. And again, it gives some really good advice to end users on what to look for. If somebody comes knocking on your door saying that you need to have an alarm system upgraded because this is happening, then it just gives a little bit of assurance on sort of questions to ask. Make sure you get more than one quote. Make sure these companies that are approaching you are approved, they are members of a trade association. That we felt was really important. And I think on the back of that, we had some involvement with trading standards, and this is still going on now, is that we do hear from the police that trading standards are actually being called to where they are experiencing rogue traders, for a better word, actually trying to sell upgraded systems when they're not always fully necessary. There's lots of different solutions out there which actually fit for different risk profiles, and as a result of that, it's not just a simple case of everything gets ripped out and started again. So it has to be considered. Our industry works along risk assessments, and that's what needs to happen, and that's what companies like Terry's and obviously James obviously have to consider these things when obviously they're installing, maintaining, or monitoring systems. Hope that helps, Katherine.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of all the manufactured equipment, does this cause any problems for security equipment manufacturers? John, over to you.
Thanks, Katherine. Good morning, everybody. First of all, the move from analog to digital voice is a major challenge, not just for CSL, but also for the wider industry. As Dave's already mentioned, there are hundreds of thousands of signaling devices connected to phone lines today. And the big challenge that we find at CSL is when we speak to installers about the PSTN switch off, most installers say, look, it's fine, it doesn't happen until December 2025. But as John's already explained, that's when Openreach switch off the PSTN network. Communications providers, starting from now, have announced to stop sales of PSTN in certain exchange areas. Different communications providers will turn off their services at different times. So it is a major, major challenge. And I think that all installers have a choice really, and that is to look at doing their upgrades in the calm of what is maybe 2021, 2022 and 2023, or wait for the chaos of 2024 and 2025. And what I mean by that is if an installer decides that, look, I'm going to do my migrations starting in 2021 in the next couple of years, we know that they've got a number of maintenance visits, potentially 6 visits to get that work done. We know that there's plenty of stock. CSL won't have any stock issues during that time. As James said before, they'll be able to process the orders that come through. But if installers decide to leave it until the last minute, there are potentially going to be stock challenges, administration issues with the ARCs, but ultimately just no time for the installer to actually get those PSTN upgrades to take place. Thank you.
Wow, this is going to be impact so many people that might not even realise it. Another question for you then, John. Why won't digital communicators work once the telephone line has been switched to all IP, for example?
Okay, so the first challenge with Digis, they've been around for decades. You know, they've been installed for over 30 years. It's really, really old technology. As Dave Wilkinson mentioned before, is that there is test labs where you can take certain equipment to. You can't even take some of these Digis into test labs because you can't even get them anymore to actually test them. And because Digis are so old, they also rely on what's called DTMF dialing. And that's that when you press the buttons on the phone, the do-do-do noise that you hear. So when we move over to the digital voice, the new routers that John mentioned before that may have some PSTN functionality of PSTN analog port on the back of them, they won't actually support that DTMF dialing. And the other challenge that you've also got with Digis, even if you could get a Digi to work on this new platform, you've got a digital communicator installed in a control panel in one room, you've got a brand new smart router in another room. What does that wire look like that connects the Digi to that new router? Logistically, how do you connect those? You'd only actually find out if that Digi works on the day that your customer plugs that new smart router into the socket. And I think that we all accept on this call, digital communicators are just unlikely to work. And it's just so much of a risk for somebody to try and bodge it on the day. Thank you.
So, I mean, this is a question that's going to go out to multiple of you. Why is it important for each sector to play a vital role in this upgrade? I mean, countless times I've heard, like you said, that this is 3-4 years away. I mean, why should people bother about this news now? Why should they act now? If I could start with you, John Livermore, that'd be great.
I think actually, as John Coleman just said, we are running out of time. And you've only got to look at the numbers. 14 million lines in this country need to be migrated over. That's more than 300,000 now every single month. And in fact, we're seeing less than that. We're seeing 10,000 maybe. So there's definitely a kind of situation where we've got the horses ready to go, and different communications providers at the moment, if you look at the ads on TV, communication providers are trying to do this by means of encouragement, faster, get faster, have faster broadband, take this package and so on. That's the way at the moment they're trying to encourage people to move over and do it in a way that's more subtle. But clearly we are not going to get those 14 million over, as John said, in the next year or so. So we're going to see potentially a stampede at the end here. And we're going to see a lot of work coming into Openreach, kind of almost last minute, where we're suddenly going to have to go wholesale through whole premises, houses, estates, putting in ONTs, which is the replacement for the master socket where it's full fibre. And that's going to be just a huge amount of work. And it's all going to be kind of rush at the end, because at 2025 is coming up. It is the end. And if you think about it just logically, and again, this is only my take on it, but you're not going to wait until November 2025. So actually, you're probably going to come into 2025 expecting most of the work done. And the last 9 months, whatever it might be, is about mopping up the really difficult ones, maybe the campuses or hospitals or something where people are left to the last minute because it's been quite difficult to do. So for the standard consumer or business customer, you would hope that was be out of the way well before 2025. So that now brings you down to 3 years and the resources. So there will come a time where someone will break ranks, is my view, and you will see one of the big CPs probably say, right, that's it, we're going to really crack on now. And all the others will start looking around and thinking, oh, we're going to get left behind if we don't crack on. So they'll all do it. And suddenly you'll be getting inundated with customers saying, I've got a letter here. It says I'm going to go over in 2 months' time or 3 months' time or next week, and I forgot to tell you I'm on holiday. How soon can you get my alarm system recommissioned and so on? So there's going to be just huge amounts of work. And of course, there's going to be pushback, because when they have that call, they're going to say, well, I don't want to pay for a call out. You know, you're supposed to come once a year to do the maintenance check. You know, one of the two are still meant to be on site. Why couldn't you have done it then? So actually, if you think about a standard customer, between now and 2025, they've got potentially 4 more visits where alarm installers will turn up for free, as it were, even though there's work involved to do. That visit charge isn't going to be a sudden kind of, can you come around next week and do it? So really, you've got arguably 3 or 4 visits to get this changed out, and maybe sooner. And customers are going to be really unhappy if they suddenly feel they are being taken for a ride, as I think Dave said earlier, because they suddenly think, I've been painted into a corner, and now I've got to kind of rush and get all this kind of stuff done. So it's been said already by other contributors, you know, it's better to get things future-proofed, in inverted commas, now, and just move over. And the alarm industry is so well advanced in this in many, many ways. Again, as Dave said, you've been going on this since 2018, since the beginning of the Ofcom announcement. So therefore, compared with other industries I deal with, and I deal with all the critical national infrastructure entities, gas, electric, water, of course, Telecare is a very similar industry to yourself, but different in many ways. And all of those folks are struggling to get on top of this, because for them, they started a bit later. So you're in a good position, but you're going to get stepped behind if you kind of, you know, almost sit on your laurels and think, oh, I'll wait till next year, Better to future-proof it and not have angry customers, I'd say.
Over to you, James. What vital role do ARCs play in this?
Well, again, I think just recapping on the workload element, it's just kind of like staggering the work through the supply chain. Like John mentioned, you know, stock levels. If you know, we have to order stock with CSL and Redcare, so if things are left late, there could be challenges around that. I also think as well, it's from talking to some installers, you know, they're leaving the Digis swap outs until things become problematic. But just from like a risk and liability point of view, I suppose installers have got to ask themselves, you know, what if there was a break-in at a site, and because it's not fully clear when some of the digital communicators are going to start working, what if there was a break-in, the signalling didn't work? You know, you're going to have an unhappy customer, and then what's going to happen next? You could potentially lose the customer, but what's the customer going to do if they've had, you know, damage to a building or, you know, stock taken, for example? So these are all kind of like unknown questions that needs to be thought about, and, you know, comes like projects into the future and think, you know, what if scenarios, and, you know, let's future-proof ourselves now to avoid potential problems further down the line.
I mean, Terry, it was mentioned there by James that it's installers that have to watch out as well. What role do installers play in this upgrade? Why is it vital for them to take part?
I think the message that's coming through, or hopefully coming through, is that it's a team effort, because we can't install a product if we don't have the product, or we can't connect it if the ARC aren't ready to connect it. So I think from an installer point of view, the more time that you have in front of you to plan the process, and you've got people supporting you, then we're not going to be sitting here one day with 300 boxes of kit that we can't install because we don't have the time, or we can't connect it because the ARCs aren't ready. So I think it's got to be a team effort and a joined up approach. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. And then Dave, from the BSIA perspective, I mean, what is our role? What are we playing as a trade association in this upgrade?
Yeah, sure. I think, as I said, really in the introduction, I mean, we have an overarching role that we're able to reach to a wide audience. And to be fair, all those that have just spoken on this actually makes the point, because we get this information back from our installers, our monitoring companies, and our signaling providers like CSL, and I think them are what we put into the mix that allows us to actually put out the messaging. As you probably recall, we had a bit of a call to action in the last year or so on this, and we continue this now. And that was where we changed from a position of, you know, be aware this is happening, to one of take action now, for this very reason, because you know, we learn as we go along. We learn what's happening. I have the advantage, I guess, of sitting in most of these meetings and these seminars and webinars and the things that do come on, and that's our role in this, is that we are there to understand what's happening. We're there to actually influence change where we can. I mean, we spent quite some time at the very start of this when we talked to Ofcom and Openreach and some of the comms providers to explain to them, how does our systems work? And I have to say is that, they were in the main very receptive to understanding the issues we got. They obviously wanted to see what types of signalling we use, so we were able to inform them of things like the protocols that we use on PSTN, such as our DTMFs and SIA formats and contact IDs. Now, these are all older systems, which I'm sure lots of those on the call probably, they're still got in service or certainly have a lot of awareness of. And one of the things that it was quite obvious from the start is that you've got people who are in the world of IP scratching their head thinking that's just not going to work on our systems. It's not designed. You've got a legacy system which is actually, you're asking it to work on an all IP network, and as much as to some degree there's some parts may well work, we found lots of evidence in the testing that we've done that incompatibility issues arise from time to time. Delays in calls. I mean, IP calls actually are in some degrees are slower than the old legacy calls that we use between a signalling device and the ARC. So we found out lots of issues which have led us to the conclusion that this is a risk too far. We can't afford to just sit back and wait for this to happen. And I think one thing that I would probably say again from our trade party point of view is that it was mentioned, I think John mentioned earlier, John Livermore, about 300,000 lines per month. I mean, I've been looking at these figures as they get quoted to us from Openreach on the calls that I attend with them, and it's a frightening thought of how many lines need to be migrated across. And at the moment we're on voluntary migrations, which means that it's it could be your neighbour that gets converted tomorrow because they want to buy a service, and you might decide not to bother going to this service for another 2 years, depending on what exchange area that you're in. There's going to come a point, I think it's around about 2023, I think John Coleman mentioned it earlier as well, is that you're going to start seeing forced migration. It's got to happen because Openreach want to reach this milestone of cutting out these 14 million or so lines by the end of 2025. That's a significant task for them to do, and of course it does mean that if all of a sudden we start to see exchanges go across, that's going to put one hell of a burden on ARCs when all of a sudden tens of thousands of lines potentially are going to go into line fault or develop an issue. And of course, one thing that we have learned from this is that not all signalling equipment for Digis, for instance, actually signal straight away. The more modern ones get a 24-hour test signal depending on what grade of system they're installed to, whereas the older ones don't. They sit there quite happily waiting to make a call in the event of an emergency. It's only when the maintenance engineer goes out and does his call and initiates the call to do his testing that he actually finds out whether that's going to work or not. So there are so many risks involved in this, and that's my biggest issue with all of this, is that it's risk-based. And I said it before, is it a risk too far to just wait and see what happens? And I think that's why we're on this call today, to try and make a case for why you need to take action now, not just leave it. And I think very finally for me, just to finish off, is that one of the things the Trade Association and what we have done is that between various comms providers, and I think the broadband stakeholder group and an organisation called the OTA2 actually produced best practice for communication providers in terms of how to manage migrations. Well, we contributed to that through our members to actually make sure that our industry was represented. And I have to say that of all the calls that I've been on, we do get call outs for the work that we've done as an industry, and that's obviously that's me fronting it on behalf of our members to say, obviously, you come to me and said, we need to sort this out, we need to do that. So I think that's a testament to the fact how we recognised in these industry forums and our information is taken into account. So there's a lot of information in their best practice guide, which we've actually influenced. For that very reason, that's what trade associations do. They represent and make sure that they get the voice of the professional security industry heard.
Great, thanks, Dave. I mean, over to you, Phil. What is the impact on Digis and landlines? Do we actually know what's going to happen?
Well, I think if we refer back to what John Coleman said earlier, that until you actually plug that box into that router or that socket on the wall, no, we don't really know what's going to happen. And that's one of the big problems. And so all we can do is try and mitigate those risks as much as possible, in my opinion. I mean, as an example, TalkTalk's router, like many other communication providers, will have an ATA on the back, which replicates the PSTN system. But there's no guarantee that this equipment's going to work. From our point of view, we urge people to test that equipment. I take John's point again that some of it is probably, you can't get it to test, which would seem to be a no-brainer that you just need to swap that out. But if it can be tested, we urge people to test it. We've got our own lab at TalkTalk. We've had some people come in and test already. But it's although the fibre, if you like, that's going to be provided by Openreach, it is exactly the same whether it's a Sky connection or a TalkTalk or a BT consumer. Again, there's no guarantee that these networks can figure exactly the same. So just because it works on one network, don't assume that it will work on other communication providers' network. Make every effort to test that equipment. So I say our lab is open. It's been delayed a little bit because of COVID, like many people. But if there is anybody who manufactures, or if you want to ask your manufacturer or supplier, have they tested? Please point them in our direction. We'd be more than happy to welcome you to our test lab up in Manchester.
Great, thank you, Phil. Question then for James and Terry. How would you view the Digis upgrade as perhaps a self-funded mission? And what happens if there is a runaway Digi? James, maybe to you first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Catherine. I think with the Digi swap outs on face value, often the installer and the end user can see an uplift in their annual fee. But I think with a lot of the swap out options, the total cost of ownership can actually be less. There's no need for a dedicated line as there is with a Digi. No hidden call costs as well. So for site signaling, open close, for example. So it's kind of more predictable. And I think what some of the newer systems give as well is upload download capability. So it can give an installer more flexibility in terms of how they price for jobs, so they can do more things remotely rather than sending engineers to site, which an end user may have to pay more for.
Okay, anything from you, Terry? From an installer perspective?
I think digital communicators, and it depends on your transparency, I suppose, as an installer or as a maintainer. If you ever identify to a customer that your alarm system is going to dial up when the alarm is set, when it's unset, when it triggers, so the number of call costs that a customer gets, which is James's point, as in the cost of ownership. So sometimes we would get customers call us to say, what's this number? Because my phone line keeps racking up these calls, and occasionally we'd get a digital communicator that probably was a runaway communicator, as in it kept signaling and signaling and signaling. It's like me continually phoning you, Catherine, and you not picking up, but I just persistently call. It ties up James's equipment in his ARC, and then the customer presents us with a bill to say, I've got a bill for 100 quid dialing this number, what are you going to do about it? And in terms of the customer retention, invariably we paid the bill. So it was like, sorry about that, we'll swap it out, we'll fit something else, and send us the bill and we'll pay you. So the cost of ownership from the end user, but there's also a sort of cost of ownership to the installer as well, of owning the customer and keeping them with you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. It can actually impact the bill and everything. Well, thank you for highlighting that, and thank you, James, as well. Dave, how are we actually going to mitigate the risks of this upgrade as a key industry body?
Okay, well, I guess based on what I've said before, and just to repeat that really, because this is more about sort of how we are moving forward. Knowledge sharing, I think that is a real key one. I mean, we have that, as I said, that ability to reach out as a trade body to actually various forums, and that does allow us to actually
I think Dave's internet has gone. They're just ever so slightly.
We find out when communication, valuable information with our members. We put a lot of information on our website, which is freely available. Even some of it's available to non-members as well. So again, there's a difference there in terms of the amount of knowledge. And of course, naturally, as a membership organisation, we share what we can with those within the membership. And again, hopefully that gives them a good start point and a steer as to what they need to do. So raising awareness, the seminars we do, these types of broadcasts, these are examples of what we do to alert those stakeholders in that. We sit in many forums with insurers, with police and others, and again, depending on what that forum is, that we have the opportunities to raise these particular issues and make them aware of the problems. Again, the product testing, I've gone into that before, but we've done quite a significant amount of product testing with our manufacturers. I'm really pleased that we represent a high proportion of the pan-European manufacturers in our particular manufacturing sections. And again, that has been very crucial, I think, in terms of actually them being able to see what happens, how to test between one IP voice network to another. I mean, that's something that has been more recent in terms of trying to see how that works. As more comms providers are building their networks and releasing them, we can actually test between both the new networks rather than just a legacy to a new one. So again, we can keep on testing at these as they develop, and I think again, it's influencing the communications providers and the comms industry, telecoms industry generally, on the types of issues. I think we've had a lot of success in letting people know what we've had, and that's allowed them to develop various, I guess, guidance. I think the NICC actually provided guidance on behalf of the comms in terms of impacts on alarm systems, and obviously how to maybe develop test plans which manufacturers use. So that's the types of mitigating that we undertake for our members to make sure that our industry is actually heard, I guess, at the end of the day, which is what this is really all about.
Great, thank you, Dave. We've got some questions coming in, so I'll add those onto our Q&A at the end. Terry, just from your perspective, what was your installer kind of upgrade process, and how were your clients informed of the changes?
I think one of the audiences made the comment about it being sort of fairly straightforward, which I think is fair. So I'm the chairman of the Southeast region of NSI. So for 10 years, I've been banging on about companies getting an inventory of their communicating systems, the number of digits they had, and coming up with a plan. So it's one thing saying it, and then if you realize that you haven't done it, I'd feel a bit foolish. So so we went early. So probably 4 or 5 years ago, we did exactly the process that was noted, I think, where we got a list of our digital communicators. We worked with, so we got a list of, and there were, let's say, 300 in terms of number. We looked at what our choices were, whether it was IP or radio, so GSM. We had a fantastic account manager, John Coleman. It was one of your guys who was brilliant. And we looked at what was going to be best for us, what was going to be like a first-time fix. We were going to have to visit, we choose to visit the customers twice a year, pre-pandemic anyway. So we're going to go twice. So we planned that on the first visit, we would take along the signal test meter to see if we can get a GSM technology to work at the customer's premises. We made a record of our findings. We worked with our account manager. We've swapped out probably 90% of our customer base. So, and the 10% we didn't was where we couldn't get a radio signal. So we went early, and we're pretty well done, other than the remaining 10%. So it is straightforward. So we did the radio signal strength test on the 6-monthly visit, and on the 12-month visit, we swapped the signals out. So it was a managed process over a 12-month period. In terms of, because we went early, we didn't want to be the first one or one of the first to say to our customer, there's a problem that they haven't heard of, there's a solution, and there's a price or a cost to that. Although they're hidden costs, as James was saying, they may or may not be aware of. So we took a hit. We just made a commercial decision that we did it at our cost. We communicated to the customer. We wrote the letters to say, this is happening. This is a problem. This is a solution. There's no cost to you, and the signalling is the same grade as what you've already got. So we made it a really simple process. We've got to continue to work on the remaining 10%. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. And I think the point was made earlier about UDL. And I think if we'd have done that swap out now, we would have put upload download technology, because my belief that we'll always visit twice. In the 18 months of the COVID, or certainly the initial lockdown, when we couldn't visit, customers didn't want us in their premises. It was then a realization that we should have put a UDL unit in there. We could have done it from our desk. So there's a bit of a learning curve there for us, or a learning process. But it isn't rocket science. And if you're going to go twice in a 12-month period, then within 12 months, you can pretty well be done, I would have said, if you'd have followed our example and the methodology we used.
Thank you, Terry. It's great to have a first-hand experience and actually see that you've got 90% already done. So thank you for sharing that. It's really been helpful. Probably one of the most popular questions that has come through all throughout the sign-up phase and even asked in our Q&A here is, has Openreach issued a detailed schedule of when the individual exchanges will be switched over or swapped out, so that installers can develop a program of signaling change out prior to an exchange being switched over? Phil, into your ball court there. Sorry, not Phil.
I think it's one for me, actually.
Gone into your ball court there.
Thank you very much. Phil's quite happy to, if he wants to take it on, I'm more happy for him to do that. I'm also going to pick up Peter's note as well, if I may, in the chat. So it shows, I think, that we do need to do more work in terms of clarifying what's happening, because there are no exchanges that are closing. And let's be very, very clear. There's a lot of work going on to put full fibre in the ground. But if we didn't put another piece of fibre in the ground anymore, there is still a 95% coverage today of fibre to the cabinet or the SOGEA product. So if we said today we're not going to do any more fibre, every communications provider, 95% of the UK could still move their customer, and they could do that without even effectively going to the premises, because we don't need to have, therefore, the ONT installed in premises. So that's already there. Remember that what we're trying to do is get to full fibre, and that's something that we've got a plan to do, to get to 25 million premises by the end of 2026. But that doesn't affect the switch off. Effectively, the switch off happens in 2025. What we need to do is not think of it by exchange as in, oh, that exchange is going digital. Oh, that's not happening. It's not how it works. An exchange is basically, as you know, a building, and inside the building there's old equipment and new equipment. The old equipment is being switched off, and that's going to happen at 2025, and that's what was put in back in the 1980s. But what is there instead is something that is fibre-based, so everything terminates on what they call a head end in terms of fibre. So don't think of it in terms of, oh, when is this exchange going over? The exchange is already there. They're ready to go. What has to happen is the communications providers, our customers and colleagues, they are the ones that will decide when they are ready to move customers over in a particular area. And as we've said a couple of times on this call already, today that's through a carrot, and that's about trying to encourage people on. But in future, I think, as Dave has mentioned, there will have to be some kind of, let's say, more robust communication. Everybody is trying not to say the word false, because nobody likes that word, but ultimately there's going to come a time when communication providers, and I'm sure Phil will come in on this in a second or two, are going to have to say, it's time, I just have to move you over, I'm running out of time. So no, you won't see a schedule in terms of that exchange is going over. It's already happened. Exchanges are ready to go. The equipment is in all these exchanges. So basically we are just waiting for communication providers to decide where they're going and when. That is all available today. What people sometimes get confused with is stop sell. So stop sell has a date of 2023, that's September 2023. And also some of you will know there's a early stop sell list that's batting around, but that's very different. Stop sell is quite simply Openreach saying to communications providers, folks, you know, you've had fibre to the cabinet a long time. You've now got an awful lot of fibre to the premises. We're just not prepared to sell you any more analog or copper lines. It's over. We're just not going to do that. So if a customer, for example, today is on a straightforward WLR PSTN line, and their CP decides to do absolutely nothing, until December 2025. They can sit there happily using that. And it's entirely down to the CP to decide to do that. No one's being cut off, nothing's being switched off. However, after 2023, September 2023, there was a national stop sell. That means it starts to limit what customers could do. So, for example, a house move. You move house after 2023, and you will find that you move into somebody's property, and they'll say, "Yep, you can take over that line." Okay, so I can't give you the line that's in there already. You can't just take that over. There is fibre outside your door. You must move over to a fibre product. So that's what's happening after 2023, the removal of new services and a limitation on what you can do to existing services. And the stop sell list, which is batting around, has got 397 exchanges on it, covering about 3.5 million premises today. That's where we've put so much fibre in, at least 75% fibre to the premises, and they've already got fibre to the cabinet, so Geo product. So we're saying it's not unreasonable in those areas to move that stop sell date forward. So we still have to give 12 months notice, and you're starting to see now some exchanges that have had 12 months notice going into stop sell. There's just a handful at the moment. We'll see a great big wodge of about 155 in October, but effectively, don't confuse the two. Nothing is coming out as a schedule to say that exchange is going over. The exchanges are already there, ready today. The move and migration is done by the CP. The second element to remember is that stop sell is coming into some exchanges early, but it will be nationally from September 2023. And stop sell says no more any analog or copper lines new, and also restrictions on what you've got. Sit on it if you want to, but if you want to change it, you want to change the name of the account, you want to change the modify the bandwidth, anything like that, we say sorry, no. If you're going to do something different, you've got fibre outside your front door, or outside your building premises, or outside your corporate premises. You need to now move that. It's a way of us trying to force the issue to get people over to that. So I hope that's covered, I think, is what Peter has said. I just want to also just pick up Mail Simon's comment on that. We're talking about the TV switch over. I get this question a lot, and it's a good question, because I get asked time and time again why this is so like the TV switch over from analog to digital. And it is in lots of ways, and it isn't in others. The reason it isn't in others is because that was a government-based initiative, and I know many of us know what's happening in Australia and Sweden and Germany, many other countries where it's been a government bankrolled a program. That's not how it works in the UK. The UK and Ofcom and DCMS and many other government departments have said this is an industry-led transition. So folks, from the point of view of CPs and Openreach and Virgin, who've got their own stuff going as well, can you just get on and do it, please? So that's kind of where we are. So hopefully that's answered those questions.
Great, thank you, John, for that. Phil, the CPs were mentioned a lot in that answer. Is there anything that you'd like to add? You're on mute, Phil.
First one of the day, I'm sorry. From our point of view, I mean, we're trying to support the industry as much as possible on this. And I mean, I've been with TalkTalk for about 7 or 8 months. Before that, I was with another provider, and we've been, coming to events like this, raising awareness of the issue. We'll continue to do that. Next week is probably there's a major security exhibition, face-to-face one, first one for probably 18 months. It'd be great to see what the turnout is at that event, so we can start getting the message across. I mentioned our test lab earlier, and we're also supporting the Openreach test lab, which they're creating in London. I think we're one of the first to put lines in there and send routers down, and that's going to be up and running shortly. And again, Dave mentioned there as well. We've been talking with Dave about ourselves and BT Consumer doing some network to network testing. So it's ongoing, if you like. I don't think there's enough that we can do. TalkTalk product voice over IP isn't launched yet. It's imminent. It's a lovely word, imminent. You can get away with all sorts using that word. But that will launch soon. So there are solutions to it. There are IP products. Most signal providers have IP products. So there is a solution that way that will that can be implemented. But as I say, we're keen to work with the industry as much as possible, and coming on the event today, it's a great opportunity for us to say where we're up to, and obviously, if there's any questions from anybody, we can take them.
Great, thank you, Phil. So James, from an ARC's perspective, what options are available for people to upgrade their Digis?
What we typically see is that most installers will go from a Digi to a single path radio or IP solution, SP2 product classification. However, if it's the right solution for the end user, we can offer a dual path from DP2 through to DP4. What we do at SMC is we work closely with the likes of the Dualcom and Redcare to make sure that we onboard and test new products and they're available to order for installers via our smartphone application. So yeah, typically it'd be single path radio or IP or otherwise known as LAN.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, John Coleman, could I upgrade a digital communicator then to a new IP or Wi-Fi system?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing for installers today is that there is plenty of choice for when they're upgrading digital communicators. You've got a Digi Pro LAN, which means you can wire it into the back of the customer's router. Coming soon, a Digi Pro Wi-Fi, where you can connect via Wi-Fi to the customer's router. But what I would say is that there are potential challenges with that as well, is that you might have an end user with a digital communicator that's got a really old router at home today, and you're going to go to site and connect your Digi Pro LAN to that router. But at some point, that end user may get a smart router from the communications provider, so that router may change at some point. So I think it needs a bit of planning, really. If I had 50 Digis, for example, and I wanted to upgrade those to IP or Wi-Fi, then potentially I might need to go back to site at some point if my end user gets a new router to change the Wi-Fi password or to put it into the back of the plug it into the back of the new router. I mean, I would always suggest from a reliability point of view, a SIM-based application, dual SIM, be it Mini Air 2 or Digi Air Pro 4G, because that then gets installed inside the control panel. If there's a power cut, it also means that the battery and the control panel will ensure that that signaling continues. But as I said at the beginning of that, there is choice for installers. If an installer wants to go down the IP route, the Wi-Fi route, we have options for those. But we've also got the new options in the Mini Air 2, which is basically secure alarm signaling and an end user app all wrapped up together, which is a great solution for upgrading these digital communicators.
Great, thank you, John. I guess one final question, which also incorporates the last question that's been in the chat as well. How can I add more value to the end user who are ultimately affected by this? And should the industry bodies be raising more awareness widely to the end user arena? Who would like to take that question first? Dave, yeah, over to you.
I don't mind. Well, I think, I almost think you can never have enough information going out. I think that's one of the keys and criticals of our work as a trade body. So I saw that message come in. I thought, well, that's a great example of, we've got lots of stuff out there, but people have to come and look for it. I'm sure we as part of our sort of membership services, obviously, again, speak with our installers, our manufacturers. I think it's a good opportunity to continue to communicate the messaging out. And I think, our messaging hasn't changed now over the last sort of 12 months in terms of the call to action. And I think, end users, it's something that is should be easy for us to reach in terms of, obviously, our installers. Teddy, for instance, obviously gets the opportunity to liaise directly with end users. I'm sure maybe James and John do as well in their sort of ways. And of course, the communication providers, as Phil sort of represents here from TalkTalk, agreeing that's where that relationship is. So, this goes back to the idea that it's all about the joined up thinking here and knowledge sharing, so that we've had lots of discussions at early stages with the likes of Ofcom when we were hoping that they would be issuing statements. I think, as was mentioned from John a bit earlier, that was quite quickly, I think, passed on to the fact this is industry led and not regulatory led, and therefore the onus is on us on the call, to represent our various constituent parts to get the message out. So yeah, I think we definitely can add more value to actually getting messages out to the end users. We obviously have our own internal end user magazines that we obviously share with people, and again, you know, it doesn't hurt to remind people again on what's going on. I think again, some of the value adds that we obviously have, I mean, we have some very good innovative products and services that have been developed on the back of this. You know, you sort of look at what's been happening in terms of technology advancements. I think Terry might have mentioned the upload download services that you know, we've used that for many years, but it's getting more smarter, it's getting more sophisticated, it's providing more than just, you know, is the alarm working, you know, so you can do maintenance work on it, you can actually change lots of user settings. So these are all values that users can have, and I think over an IP type network that becomes easier to actually enable and use. And of course, when you think about cloud services, web portals, lots of manufacturers have all this now anyway. So it's sort of becoming almost de facto that you'd want to do this to keep up with technology. You know, adding sort of video surveillance, access control services is now quite straightforward in terms of that. So there's, given the fact that, you know, you can operate so much more bandwidth over services these days, I think it's the only natural that I would expect installers and others to promote the fact it's not just an alarm system anymore. It's much bigger than that, and it has lots of value add services that are more efficient and provide more to that end user. And I think the very final one for me would be, use Echo as an example. Echo, the call handling service, which has been set up by industry. You know, the reason that we helped set that up was because it's another example of 21st century innovation. It's stuff that we've been needing to do for years, and that all operates over IP protocol. You know, why wouldn't you want to do this? Why do you not want to bring our services into the 21st century? You know, this to me is a catalyst for that. It's another one of those examples of, you know, here's the good reason why you want to do it. And I think that's probably something that, you know, our industry is a fantastic growing industry, and it's got so much more that it's going to offer going forward.
Great, thank you, Dave. I mean, in the Q&A, we've had Andrew Collinson post a comment. He says, today's discussion has been focused on problems which this may cause the industry, as highlighted eloquently by a number of the speakers. Other than equipment stopping working, there have been very few advantages cited for customers we serve. Since it is this community who are the gatekeepers for this change, are there any other advantages for the customer? What do the panel consider these advantages to be? And how do they consider these advantages should be framed to enable our teams to discuss these with the client and drive the desired result?
I think let's come in on that one first, if that's okay. I just want to finish off on the last point, if that's okay as well. So just really following from what Dave said, I think Dave is absolutely right. It is easy to kind of be, oh, this is all doom and gloom, this is all horrible. Actually, this is massively beneficial. There are going to be many, many, many customers, in fact, the majority of us are going to see a complete change in our lifestyle over the next 4 or 5 years, because, you know, much faster broadband. A lot of us moan about the speed of broadband or reliability. This move to fibre is going to be huge. And Openreach's position is that we're working really closely with CPs. They're our customers, they're our colleagues. We're working in collaboration. Yes, there are hurdles, and we're going to work collaboratively to try and find ways around that. In terms of the timescales, we've said that is very much with CPs, and they'll decide when they're ready to do that. And to be fair to them, remember, they do have commercial issues as well. They can't really just put all their plans out, because the competitors will know exactly the same, in the same way that you guys in the alarm industry wouldn't necessarily put all of your plans out for the same reason. But things like biometrics, the Internet of Things, I've been hearing this expression for years. No one's told me what it is yet. They show me a fridge that costs £3,000 and is going to do an email for me, but that's because at the moment we haven't got the imagination. I mean, connected homes and things like that are really now a thing that's happening. I spent probably £100 and found myself with half a dozen controllers that do lights and devices and stuff, and so now I'm completely addicted to it, because I now understand the benefit of the things that I can now do. And once you start to taste the difference, what you can achieve through faster bandwidth and the speeds and stuff like that, you do see there are massive benefits. And I think in a few years' time we'll just think to ourselves, do you remember when it was a bit slow. And like we talk about dial-up now, we go, oh, can you remember that? Dial-up when you got one line of text every 10 minutes. And we're going to get used to having much better quality services. But it is challenging and it is complex, and there are lots of players in that. And what I would say is that from the alarm community point of view, as I think all the panelists have said today, the urge really to everybody is to take the initiative. Don't wait until this happens. What we're doing, I think Phil touched upon it, there is now a test lab that's nearly there. We're waiting for, it'll be the only test lab in the country that will have all different CPs in it. So different companies have their, so Phil's got his up at TalkTalk, BT's got one, Virgin's got one, and so on. But he'll have, we're agnostic as to which CP, so we'll have different CPs equipment there. Hopefully that'll open next month. We're just waiting for, well, hopefully this month, they're in September. But we're just waiting at the moment for the lines to be installed. And then I think the final point is, we've got lots of information out there. We've now got industry-based websites we didn't have before. Everything was CP centric. So now you can go out, you can get every month, you can download the slides, you can download the stop sell list. But ultimately, as everyone has said, it needs action. And the best way to stop your customer being unhappy, as I said earlier, is to get out now, speak to them, talk about making them future proof. If they don't believe you and they say, well, you're just trying to sell me something, which you do get all the time. Openreach have got websites and all sorts of things there that you can say, well, look, there's the authenticity. This isn't me just trying to flog you some. This is actually happening. I don't want you to be left out. I don't want you to have to pay extra for this, that, and the other. If we do it now, we're future-proofing you. In many ways, it doesn't help us because Openreach are a landline-based organisation. We don't want people rushing off to SIM cards and all sorts of other things. But nonetheless, we also don't want customers disenfranchised and lose their service. So there's a balance there as well. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you, John, for going into depth in that. Anything else to add for this question? I mean, how basically can installers communicate with their clients? Terry, you've had this from a first-hand experience. Instead of just saying, other than the equipment not working, what did you actually say to your end users?
I think because we went early, we did talk about changes in technology, possibly the hidden costs, obviously, of the dial-up. And I think that we chose SIM technology for the reasons that John highlighted earlier, that it was we could pretty much control that process. The moment we plugged it in, potentially the router could fall over, or there could be a problem downstream, and we didn't know if it was us or the service provider. So we viewed it from the point of view of minimal disruption. If someone's getting a benefit, and the benefit was they didn't need a dedicated phone line, there weren't going to be any call charges, and it's a more reliable, stable technology, which is how we communicated it, and there's no cost, then we were very optimistic that there would be no fallout, and there wasn't any. So, why would there be? They're getting a better system at no additional cost. So we took a commercial view on that, and that was our approach. I'm not saying it's right for everyone, but we were able to do it, and we did, and it was very successful.
Katherine, if I can just add something as well, it was a good point that was raised by the attendee just on adding a bit more value and how do they go about it. And it's something installers often say to us, look, I've had these Digi customers for years and years, and I'm now expected to write to them to say, look, your Digi's not going to work anymore. We're going to give you an upgrade, and it's going to cost you this amount of extra money. And at that point, the end user may turn around and say, do I see any value in that Digi? Do I need that Digi? I might just cancel that Digi. So what installers say to us is, look, when we write to the customers, we want to add a bit more value. And that's when we came up with Mini Air 2, as the name is, which is basically being able to write to an end user to say, look, Katherine, you've got a digital communicator. It's been installed for 20 years. You've got call charges. At some point, that Digi won't work because of these changes that are happening on the Openreach network. So we're going to give you an upgrade. But what we're also going to do is when we upgrade you to Mini Air 2, is we're now going to give you a smartphone app. So not only do you get your alarms monitored by a professional alarm receiving centre, but you now also get those alarms coming through to a mobile phone on an app, and you can set and unset your alarm potentially by the mobile phone. And that's giving a bit more value to the end user. So something we talk about to installers on a regular basis, look, when you write to them, and when you write to the end user about these upgrades, if we can add more value and the end user can see that they're getting more benefits, then that's probably the best approach that we would advise for an installer taking. Like what James and Terry both said before as well, even the benefits of adding upload download is a real big upsell benefit, both for the installer and for the end user as well.
Great, thanks, John. I mean, James, anything that you'd like to add on that? Because again, ARCs are being mentioned in it. We've had the installer perspective, we've had a manufacturer's perspective as well. It's interesting to kind of see from the ARC side of it, of how you communicate and how you send that message out there. You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, we've got a team of account managers based around the UK. So similar to John's team, we're constantly talking to installers, showing them lists of their PSTN systems and trying to help them with that end user communication. I think the points that Terry and John raised were valid. I think upload download can be really important as well. I think from an end user point of view, if things can be fixed remotely without the need for an engineer to go to site, often at unsociable times, that can give massive benefits to an end user. But yeah, but we just try and work with our installer base as close as we can, Catherine, just to help them navigate the swap outs.
Great. No, there's been some really insightful information today, and I hope all the people attending have been able to have their questions answered. And if anyone has any questions that they would like answered after this, then please do drop us a line. It's info@bsia.co.uk. Send all your questions there. We'll be following up with some of you that have submitted your email addresses as well. This broadcast is going to be available on demand from our YouTube channel, so please share it far and wide with everyone that needs to know this message, and we'll be doing the same. Thank you all to our panelists for joining. You've said some amazing things. I know it's not always positive things because we're displaying a problem, the impact, but hopefully there have been some solutions in there. And thank you, basically. Thank you to everyone. See you all soon.
Thanks.
Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you.